The sound of her own breathing filled the empty hallway as Elena stood frozen outside her bedroom door, her trembling hand still gripping the doorknob. Through the crack in the door, she could see her husband James wrapped in sheets that should have been theirs, with a woman whose laughter had been echoing through their home for the past hour. The woman wore Elena's favorite silk robe, the one James had given her for their 3rd anniversary, the one she treasured because he said the deep blue color made her dark eyes sparkle like stars. Elena's legs felt weak as she backed away from the door, her bare feet silent on the cold hardwood floor. 3 years of marriage, 5 years together, and this was how it ended. Not with a fight, not with harsh words, but with her standing in her own hallway like a stranger in her own home, watching her life crumble into pieces she didn't know how to put back together. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure they would hear it from the bedroom. The woman's voice drifted through the door again, younger and brighter than Elena's own, filled with the kind of carefree joy that Elena remembered having once upon a time. Before the long hours at work trying to support their dreams. Before the nights when James came home late with excuses that she wanted to believe. Before she started feeling like she was disappearing a little more each day. The house felt different now, like the walls themselves knew what she had discovered. Every photo on the hallway wall seemed to mock her. Their wedding day, their honeymoon in Mexico, last Christmas when she thought they were happy. Had James been thinking of someone else even then? Had he been planning this betrayal while she was planning their future? Elena moved through their home like a ghost, gathering her things with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She pulled her old leather suitcase from the closet. The one she'd bought when she first moved to the city, full of hope and dreams that now felt like they belonged to someone else entirely. Into it went her clothes, her books, the few pieces of jewelry that had been her grandmother's. She left behind the expensive things James had bought her, the designer dresses and fancy shoes that had never really felt like her anyway. As she packed, memories flooded back. Not just of James, but of who she used to be before she lost herself trying to be the perfect wife. She remembered the woman who had once traveled across the country with nothing but this same suitcase and a head full of dreams. That woman had been brave, independent, ready to take on the world. Somewhere along the way that woman had gotten lost. The sound from the bedroom grew louder, and Elena knew she had to leave before she lost her nerve completely. She couldn't face James right now, couldn't bear to see the look in his eyes when he realized she knew. She couldn't handle his apologies or excuses or promises that things would change. She had heard enough promises from him to last a lifetime. Elena wrote a simple note and left it on the kitchen counter. I know. I'm gone. Don't follow me. She didn't sign it with love, didn't add any of the endearments that had once come so naturally. What was the point? Love was supposed to be about trust, about choosing each other every day, about building something together that was stronger than anything that tried to tear it apart. This wasn't love. This was just habit and convenience and fear of being alone. The front door felt heavier than usual as she opened it, like the house itself was trying to keep her trapped in this life that no longer fit. But Elena pushed through, stepping out into the cool evening air with her suitcase in one hand and her purse in the other. She didn't look back at the house with its warm yellow windows and perfectly manicured lawn. That house had never really been hers anyway. It had been James's choice, James's dream, James's vision of what their life should look like. Walking away from everything she had known for the past 5 years should have felt terrifying, but instead Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in months, relief. The weight that had been pressing down on her chest for so long began to lift with each step she took down the sidewalk. She didn't know where she was going or what she would do next, but for the first time in years, those unknowns felt like possibilities instead of problems. The city streets were busy with evening commuters heading home to families and lives that Elena envied. She walked among them but felt separate, like she was moving through a different world entirely. Every face she passed looked content, purposeful, certain of where they belonged. Elena couldn't remember the last time she had felt that kind of certainty about anything. Her phone buzzed in her purse, probably James finally realizing she was gone. Elena turned it off without looking at the message. Whatever he had to say, she wasn't ready to hear it. Maybe she would never be ready. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal with words, no matter how pretty those words might be. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Elena of better times, she made her way toward the train station. She had enough money saved in her personal account to go anywhere she wanted, to start over completely if that's what it took. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. At 32, she was starting over from nothing, with no plan and no safety net except her own determination to build something better. The train station loomed ahead, its large windows glowing with warm light against the darkening sky. Inside, Elena could see travelers with their own suitcases and their own stories, all heading somewhere that mattered to them. Soon she would be one of them, carrying her pain and her hope in equal measure, ready to discover who she really was when she wasn't trying to be who someone else needed her to be. The train station buzzed with activity as Elena stepped through the heavy glass doors, her footsteps echoing in the vast space above. The building felt enormous around her, with its high ceilings and walls lined with departure boards showing destinations that might as well have been on different planets. She had never felt so small or so alone in her entire life. Elena found an empty bench near the center of the station and sat down heavily, her suitcase at her feet like a faithful dog. Around her, people moved with purpose, businessmen checking their phones, families with children and too much luggage, couples holding hands as they navigated toward their platforms. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going except her. She stared up at the departure board, watching the destinations scroll by like a lottery wheel. Chicago, Seattle, Denver, Atlanta. Each name represented a chance to start over, but Elena couldn't make herself care about any particular place. What did it matter where she went when she was running away from everything instead of towards something? The bench felt cold through her jeans, and Elena pulled her jacket tighter around herself. She had left the house so quickly that she hadn't thought to check the weather, hadn't thought about much of anything except getting away from the sound of her husband's betrayal. Now, sitting still for the first time since her world fell apart, reality began to sink in. She had no job lined up, no friends in any of these distant cities, no plan beyond buying a ticket and hoping for the best. The money in her account would last a few months if she was careful, but then what? Elena had spent the last 3 years working part-time while supporting James's business dreams, letting her own career take the back seat to what they said was their shared future. Now she realized how much she had given up, how dependent she had become on a life that was never really hers. A family walked past her bench, parents with 2 young children who were excited about going to visit their grandparents. The little girl had the same dark skin and bright eyes as Elena, and for a moment Elena imagined what it might have been like if she and James had started their own family. The thought made her chest tight with a grief she hadn't expected. She wasn't just losing her husband and her home, she was losing the future she had spent years planning and hoping for. "Attention passengers," a voice announced over the intercom, "the 8:15 train to Chicago will be boarding at platform 3 in 10 minutes. Elena watched as several people around her gathered their belongings and began moving toward the platform. She could buy a ticket to Chicago. She had visited there once for work and remembered liking the city's energy, its mix of culture and opportunity. But as she reached for her purse, doubt crept in again. What if she was making a huge mistake? What if she should go back home and try to work things out with James? What if running away was just the coward's way out? She had never been the type of person to make big decisions quickly, had always been careful and thoughtful about major changes in her life. The problem was, this didn't feel like a decision at all. It felt like survival. Every minute she had spent in that house after discovering James's affair had felt like drowning. Every breath had been a struggle, every thought had been poison. If she stayed, if she tried to fix something that was so fundamentally broken, she might lose herself completely. Elena's phone buzzed again in her purse, and this time she couldn't resist checking it. 7 missed calls from James, along with a string of text messages that started apologetic and quickly turned angry. "Where are you? We need to talk. You can't just run away from this. I'm calling the police if you don't answer me." The messages made Elena's hands shake with anger. Even now, even after what she had seen, James was trying to control her reaction, trying to make her respond on his timeline. The threat about calling the police was particularly cruel, as if she were some kind of criminal for leaving a situation that was breaking her heart. She turned the phone off again and shoved it deep into her purse. James didn't get to dictate how she handled this betrayal. He had made his choice when he brought another woman into their bed, into their home, into their life. Now Elena got to make her choice about how to respond. "Last call for the 8:15 to Chicago," the announcer's voice echoed through the station. Elena stood up, decision made, and began walking toward the ticket counter. Chicago it would be. She had always been good at starting over, had done it before when she first moved here for college. She could do it again. The line at the ticket counter moved slowly, giving Elena time to think about practical things. She would need to find a place to stay, look for work, maybe take some time to figure out what she really wanted to do with her life. The last few years had been so focused on supporting James and building their life together that she had forgotten what her own dreams looked like. As she got closer to the counter, Elena felt a strange mix of fear and excitement building in her chest. This was really happening. She was really leaving everything behind and starting fresh. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time, like jumping off a cliff and learning to fly on the way down. The woman in front of her finished her transaction and moved away from the counter, leaving Elena face to face with the ticket agent. This was it. The moment when running away became a real plan, when her broken marriage became the first chapter of whatever came next instead of the end of her story. "Can I help you?" the agent asked with a professional smile. Elena opened her mouth to ask for a ticket to Chicago, but before she could speak, she heard a voice behind her that would change everything. "Excuse me, miss. I couldn't help but notice you seem upset. Are you all right?" Elena turned around, startled by the gentle voice that had interrupted her thoughts. Behind her stood a man who looked to be in his early 40s, with kind brown eyes and an expression of genuine concern. He was tall and well-dressed in a simple but expensive-looking suit, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from success in life. But it was his eyes that caught Elena's attention. They held a warmth that reminded her of her father, a gentleness that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in months. "I'm sorry," the man continued, seeming to realize how his question might sound to a stranger. "I don't mean to intrude. It's just that you look like someone who's carrying the weight of the world, and I remember what that feels like. Sometimes a kind word from a stranger can make all the difference." Elena felt tears spring to her eyes before she could stop them. After hours of holding herself together, this unexpected kindness from a complete stranger threatened to break down all her carefully constructed walls. She quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, embarrassed by her emotional reaction. "I'm fine," she managed to say, though her voice wavered. "Just having a difficult day." The man nodded as if he understood completely. "Those kinds of days are the worst," he said softly. "The kind where everything you thought you knew turns out to be different than you expected. I'm Robert, by the way. And you don't have to talk to me if you don't want to, but you also don't have to pretend everything's okay if it's not." Something about the way he said it, without pity, without pushiness, just simple human understanding, made Elena's defenses crumble a little more. She looked at this stranger named Robert and saw nothing but honest concern. No hidden agendas, no expectation that she owed him anything in return for his kindness. "I'm Elena," she said quietly. "And you're right, everything I thought I knew just turned out to be a lie." Robert's expression softened even more. "I'm sorry to hear that. Betrayal is one of the hardest things to recover from, especially when it comes from someone you trusted completely." Elena stared at him in surprise. "How did you know it was betrayal?" "Because I recognized the look," Robert said with a sad smile. "I've been where you are, standing in a train station with a suitcase, trying to figure out how to start over when everything you built your life on has fallen apart. It's a particular kind of pain that shows in people's eyes." The ticket agent cleared her throat behind Elena, reminding her that she was still in line. Elena turned back apologetically, but Robert stepped forward and spoke to the agent directly. "I'm sorry, but could you give us just a moment?" he asked politely. "I think this lady might need a few minutes to think about her destination." The agent nodded and called for the next person in line. Robert gently guided Elena away from the counter toward a quieter area of the station, near a coffee shop that was just closing for the evening. Elena followed him, grateful for his take-charge attitude when she felt too overwhelmed to make decisions. "When I was in your position," Robert said as they found a quiet corner to talk, "a very wise woman told me that running away and moving forward aren't the same thing. Running away is about escaping pain. Moving forward is about choosing hope. The difference is having a reason to get on the train that's about where you're going, not just about what you're leaving behind." Elena sat down on another bench, her suitcase at her feet, and looked up at this man who seemed to understand exactly what she was going through. "How do you know the difference?" she asked. "Because right now, all I want is to get as far away from here as possible." "That's natural," Robert said, sitting down beside her but maintaining a respectful distance. "The pain is so fresh that escape feels like the only option. But in my experience, you can't outrun heartbreak. It follows you wherever you go until you find a way to heal from it." "So what did you do?" Elena asked. "When you were standing in a train station like this?" Robert was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much of his story to share. "I had lost everything that mattered to me," he said finally. "My marriage, my sense of who I was, my faith that good things could last. I was ready to disappear completely, to go somewhere no one knew me and start over as someone entirely different." Elena nodded, recognizing the feeling. "What stopped you?" "A stranger showed me kindness when I needed it most, just like I'm trying to do for you now. She helped me realize that starting over doesn't have to mean throwing away everything you are. Sometimes it just means finding a place where you can be yourself again, where you can remember what you're worth." Elena felt more tears coming, but this time they felt different. Less like grief and more like relief. For the first time since she had discovered James's betrayal, someone was talking to her like she was valuable, like her pain mattered, like she deserved better than what she had been given. "I don't even know where to go," she admitted. "I was about to buy a ticket to Chicago just because it was the next train leaving, but I don't have any real reason to go there. I don't have a real reason to go anywhere." Robert smiled gently. "Then maybe that's your answer. Instead of choosing a destination based on running away, why don't you take some time to think about what you actually want? There's a nice hotel about 2 blocks from here. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe, and they have weekly rates. You could stay there for a few days, give yourself time to breathe and think clearly about what comes next." The suggestion surprised Elena. She had been so focused on the idea of fleeing immediately that she hadn't considered the possibility of staying nearby while she figured things out. The thought of having time and space to process everything that had happened felt like a luxury she hadn't known she needed. "I don't know," she said hesitantly. "What if James finds me? What if he tries to convince me to come back before I'm ready to deal with him?" "Then you tell him you're not ready," Robert said simply. "You're an adult, Elena. You don't owe anyone access to you when you're hurting, not even your husband. Especially not your husband if he's the one who caused the hurt." Something about the way Robert said her name made Elena feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. Not as James's wife, not as half of a couple, but as herself, as Elena, a person with her own thoughts and feelings and right to make her own choices about her own life. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Robert's smile was warm and sad at the same time. "Because someone was kind to me when I needed it most, and it saved my life in ways I didn't even understand at the time. And because you remind me that good people deserve good things, even when life makes it hard to remember that." 3 days later, Elena woke up in her hotel room feeling something she hadn't experienced in months: rested. The small room at the Comfort Inn wasn't luxurious, but it was hers in a way that the beautiful house she had shared with James never really had been. She could sleep without listening for the sound of James coming home late. She could eat what she wanted for breakfast without worrying about whether there would be enough left for him. She could think her own thoughts without having to explain or defend them to anyone. Robert had been right about taking time to breathe and think clearly. The first day had been rough, lots of crying, lots of angry phone calls from James that she let go to voicemail, lots of staring at the ceiling wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. But by the second day, the fog in her mind had started to clear, and Elena began to remember who she had been before she lost herself in trying to be the perfect wife. She had been ambitious once, with dreams of working in social services helping families in crisis. She had been passionate about making a difference in the world, about using her education and her natural empathy to help people who were struggling. Somewhere along the way, those dreams had gotten pushed aside for James's career, James's goals, James's vision of their future together. On the third morning, Elena made a decision. Instead of buying a train ticket to anywhere else, she was going to stay in the city and rebuild her life here. She knew the area, had connections from her previous job, and had enough savings to rent a small apartment while she looked for work. Running away might feel dramatic, but staying and building something better felt brave. She was getting dressed when someone knocked on her hotel room door. Elena looked through the peephole and was surprised to see Robert standing in the hallway, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing a concerned expression. "I hope I'm not overstepping," he said when she opened the door. "But I was worried about how you were doing and I thought you might like some company for breakfast. There's a great little place across the street that makes the best pancakes in the city." Elena smiled, realizing how much she had missed having someone care about her well-being. James had stopped asking how she was doing months ago, had stopped noticing when she was happy or sad or stressed. Having Robert show up with coffee and genuine concern made her feel valuable again. "That sounds wonderful," she said. "Just let me grab my purse." The restaurant Robert had chosen was a small family-owned place with mismatched chairs and the kind of warm atmosphere that made Elena feel at home immediately. The owner, Mrs. Patterson, greeted Robert like an old friend and insisted on bringing them her special blueberry pancakes without being asked. "You're a regular here," Elena observed as they settled into a booth by the window. "I've been coming here for about 2 years," Robert said. "Ever since I moved to this neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson reminds me of my grandmother. She has this way of making everyone feel like family." Elena took a bite of the pancakes and nearly groaned with pleasure. "These are incredible. I can see why you keep coming back." "Food tastes better when it's made with love," Robert said with a smile. "So how are you feeling? Have you had time to think about what you want to do next?" Elena set down her fork and looked out the window at the busy street. "I've decided to stay," she said. "Not in the hotel forever, obviously, but in the city. I'm going to find my own apartment, look for a job, try to rebuild my life here instead of running away to somewhere new. Robert's face lit up with approval. That's wonderful, Elena. I think you're making a brave choice. It takes courage to stay and face your problems instead of hoping distance will solve them. I'm scared, Elena admitted. It's been so long since I've been on my own, since I've had to make all my own decisions and take care of everything myself. What if I'm not as strong as I think I am? You're stronger than you know, Robert said with conviction. The fact that you left a bad situation instead of staying and accepting it proves that. The fact that you're choosing to build something new instead of just running away proves it even more. Elena felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were good tears. Thank you, she said softly. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been at the train station that night. You probably saved me from making a decision I would have regretted. Robert reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. We all need someone to show us kindness when we're at our lowest point. I'm just glad I could be that person for you. The warmth of his hand on hers sent a flutter through Elena's chest that surprised her. She hadn't thought about attraction or romance or anything beyond survival since discovering James's affair, but something about Robert made her remember that she was still a woman with feelings and desires beyond just healing from betrayal. She pulled her hand back gently, not wanting to send the wrong message. She wasn't ready for anything romantic, might not be ready for a long time. But the fact that she could feel anything positive toward a man after what James had done to her seemed like a good sign. Can I ask you something? Elena said. What did you do when you were starting over? How did you figure out what came next? Robert was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. I threw myself into work at first, he said. It was easier to focus on building something professional than to deal with the personal stuff. But eventually I realized that work success doesn't mean much if you don't have people to share it with. So you found someone new? Not in the way you might think, Robert said with a slightly mysterious smile. I learned to be comfortable with myself again first. I learned to enjoy my own company, to pursue things that interested me, to build friendships that weren't based on couple relationships. The personal stuff came later when I was ready for it. Elena nodded, understanding what he meant. She had forgotten how to be just Elena instead of Elena and James. She had forgotten what she liked to do in her free time, what made her laugh, what made her feel passionate about life. Maybe rebuilding meant rediscovering those things before she could even think about sharing them with someone else. Would you? Elena started, then stopped, feeling suddenly shy. Would you maybe want to help me look for apartments this weekend? I don't really know the different neighborhoods very well, and I could use someone with local knowledge. Robert's smile was warm and genuine. I would love to help you with that. And I know the perfect real estate agent. She helped me find my place, and she's great at matching people with neighborhoods that fit their personalities. As they finished breakfast and prepared to leave, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in years: excitement about the future. Not the kind of excitement that came from planning someone else's dreams, but real anticipation for what she might discover about herself and what she might build with her own hands and her own choices. Walking back to the hotel, Elena realized that Robert had become more than just a kind stranger. He was becoming a friend, someone who saw value in her when she was struggling to see it in herself. She didn't know where their friendship might lead, but for the first time in months, she was curious about the future instead of afraid of it. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in the doorway of her new apartment, keys in hand and a smile on her face that felt rusty from disuse. The one-bedroom place wasn't large, but it had huge windows that filled the space with light, hardwood floors that creaked in a homey way, and a tiny balcony that overlooked a tree-lined street. Most importantly, it was entirely hers, chosen by her, paid for by her, decorated according to her own taste instead of someone else's vision of what their life should look like. Robert had been invaluable during the apartment hunt, patiently driving her around to different neighborhoods and helping her see the potential in places she might have overlooked. He had a way of asking the right questions, not just about practical things like rent and utilities, but about how each place made her feel, whether she could imagine herself being happy there. It's perfect, Robert said, setting down the last box of Elena's belongings in the living room. It feels like you already, if that makes sense. Warm and welcoming and full of possibility. Elena looked around at the space that was slowly becoming home. She had bought new furniture. Nothing expensive, but everything chosen because she loved it rather than because it matched some predetermined style. The couch was deep blue velvet, soft enough to sink into with a good book. The kitchen table was vintage oak, big enough for cooking projects and small enough to feel intimate. Everything was a reflection of who she was discovering herself to be. I can't believe how good it feels to have my own space, Elena said, settling onto the couch and curling her legs under her. I'd forgotten what it was like to make decisions based on what I actually want instead of what I think someone else wants me to want. Robert sat down on the other end of the couch, careful to maintain the respectful distance he always kept. Over the past 2 weeks, he had become Elena's closest friend, but he never pushed for more than she was ready to give. He seemed to understand instinctively that she needed time and space to heal, that rushing into anything romantic would be a mistake they would both regret. "What's the first thing you want to do now that you're settled?" Robert asked. Elena smiled, pulling a folded piece of paper from her purse. "Actually, I have some news. I got a job offer today." Robert's face lit up with genuine excitement. "Elena, that's wonderful. Tell me everything." "It's with the city's family services department," Elena explained, unable to keep the pride out of her voice. "I'll be working with families in crisis, helping them navigate resources and support systems. It's exactly the kind of work I always wanted to do before I got sidetracked." "Before you put your dreams on hold for someone else's," Robert said gently. Elena nodded. "The woman who interviewed me said something that really stuck with me. She said that people who have experienced their own struggles often make the best advocates for others because they understand that everyone deserves compassion and a second chance." Robert reached over and squeezed her hand briefly. "She's absolutely right. You're going to be amazing at this job, Elena. You have such a natural empathy and strength. The families you work with are going to be lucky to have you." The warmth in Robert's voice made Elena's heart flutter again, the way it had been doing more and more often lately. She was starting to recognize the signs that her feelings for him were growing beyond friendship, but she wasn't sure what to do about it. Was it too soon after her divorce? Was she just transferring her gratitude for his kindness into something romantic because she was lonely and hurt? "Can I ask you something personal?" Elena said, needing to understand more about the man who had become so important to her healing process. "Of course. You mentioned that you had been through something similar, betrayal, starting over. What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" Robert was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could see him deciding how much to share. "I was married for 8 years, he said finally, to someone I thought was my best friend as well as my wife. We were building a life together, working toward the same goals, or at least I thought we were." Elena waited, sensing there was more to the story. "It turned out she had been planning to leave me for almost 2 years, Robert continued. "She had been secretly moving money out of our joint accounts, had already hired a lawyer, had even been seeing someone else. But instead of just leaving, she tried to take everything we had built together. Not just the financial stuff, but our mutual friends, our social circle, even tried to turn my own family against me." Elena felt a surge of anger on Robert's behalf. "That's horrible. How did you get through it?" "Barely," Robert admitted with a rueful smile. "I lost myself for a while there. Started questioning everything I thought I knew about people, about relationships, about whether it was even worth it to trust anyone again. I threw myself into work because it was the only place where I felt like I had any control over the outcomes." "Is that when you were at the train station? When you were thinking about running away?" Robert nodded. "I had convinced myself that if I could just start over somewhere completely new, where no one knew my story or my failures, maybe I could figure out how to be happy again. But running away doesn't actually solve anything. It just delays having to deal with the real problems." Elena thought about her own impulse to flee to Chicago or anywhere else that first night. "What made you stay?" "A woman at the station that night saw me struggling and took the time to talk to me," Robert said. "She helped me realize that my ex-wife's betrayal said something about her character, not mine. That I didn't have to let her bad choices define my worth or my future." Elena felt a chill of recognition. "Is that why you approached me that night? Because someone had done the same thing for you?" Robert's smile was soft and honest. "Partly. But also because you reminded me of myself in that moment. Someone good who had been hurt by someone who didn't deserve them. I wanted to pay forward the kindness I had been shown." Something in the way he said it made Elena's heart race. There was more in his words than just general kindness. There was something personal, something that spoke to feelings that went beyond wanting to help a stranger in crisis. "Elena," Robert said, his voice suddenly serious, "I need to tell you something, and I hope it doesn't change anything between us." Elena's stomach dropped. After everything that had happened with James, her first instinct was to expect bad news, to brace herself for another betrayal or disappointment. "What is it?" Robert took a deep breath. "I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am." Elena's heart began to race as she looked at Robert's serious expression. After what she had been through with James, the words, "I haven't been completely honest," sent alarm bells ringing through her entire body. She pulled back slightly on the couch, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she had become with this man who was now admitting to lying to her. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady even though her hands were starting to shake. Robert ran his fingers through his hair, clearly struggling with how to explain. "I haven't lied to you about anything important," he said quickly, seeming to sense her panic. "My name really is Robert, and everything I've told you about my past, about my marriage and divorce, all of that is completely true." "Then what haven't you been honest about?" Robert stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below as if the answer might be written on the sidewalk. "My work," he said finally. "You know I work in business, but I haven't told you what kind of business or how successful it's been." Elena felt a mixture of relief and confusion. "I don't understand. Why would you lie about your job?" Robert turned back to face her, his expression pained. "Because I'm wealthy, Elena. Very wealthy. I own a company that does business consulting for major corporations, and it's been extremely successful. I have houses, cars, investments, more money than I could spend in several lifetimes." Elena stared at him, trying to process this information. "I still don't understand why you would hide that." "Because every time I tell someone about my financial situation, everything changes," Robert said, sitting back down but maintaining distance between them. "People start treating me differently. They either want something from me, or they assume I think I'm better than them, or they decide that my problems don't matter because I have money to solve them." Elena thought back over their conversations, remembering moments that now made more sense. The expensive suit he had been wearing that first night. The way he had offered to pay for her hotel room without seeming to worry about the cost. His knowledge of the best restaurants and neighborhoods in the city. "That first night at the train station," Elena said slowly, "you offered to help me with the hotel. You weren't just being kind, you were planning to pay for it, weren't you?" Robert nodded, looking embarrassed. "I was. And I know how that must look to you now, like I was trying to buy your friendship or make you feel obligated to me somehow. But that wasn't it at all, Elena. I just saw someone who was hurting, and I had the means to help make her situation a little easier." Elena felt a confusing mix of emotions. Part of her was hurt that Robert had kept such a big secret from her for weeks. Part of her was embarrassed that she had been accepting help from someone who probably saw her as a charity case. But part of her was also trying to understand his perspective, to see why he might have thought hiding his wealth was necessary. "I need some air," she said, standing up abruptly. "I need to think about this." Robert stood too, concern written all over his face. "Elena, please don't leave angry. Let me explain why I thought this was the right thing to do." But Elena was already grabbing her jacket and heading for the door. "I'm not angry," she said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. "I just need some space to process this. I'll call you later." She left her apartment and walked quickly down the street, her mind racing with questions and doubts. Had Robert been genuine in his friendship, or had he seen her as some kind of project, a wounded bird he could fix with his money and connections? Had all of his kindness been real, or had it been the kind of casual generosity that was easy for someone who had more resources than he knew what to do with? Elena found herself at a small park a few blocks from her apartment and sat down on a bench, watching children play on the playground while their parents chatted nearby. The scene was so normal, so far removed from the confusion in her head, that it helped her start to think more clearly. She tried to remember every interaction she had had with Robert, looking for signs that he had been condescending or manipulative. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that he had never acted like someone who thought he was better than her. He had never made her feel small or dependent. He had asked for her opinions, had listened to her thoughts and feelings, had treated her like an equal in every way that mattered. The wealth revelation was shocking, but it didn't actually change any of the conversations they had shared or the genuine care he had shown for her well-being. If anything, it made his kindness more meaningful, not less. He could have helped her out of obligation or pity, but instead he had taken the time to really get to know her, to understand what she needed beyond just financial assistance. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from Robert. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was afraid of losing your friendship, which I realize now was selfish. You deserved honesty from the beginning. I hope you can forgive me." Looking at the message, Elena realized that her hurt feelings weren't really about the money at all. They were about the secret itself, about feeling like she didn't know Robert as well as she thought she did. After being betrayed by James, the discovery that Robert had been hiding something significant felt like a warning sign, even if the secret itself wasn't harmful. But as she sat in the park watching families enjoy their evening together, Elena began to understand Robert's dilemma. How do you tell someone you've just met that you're wealthy without it changing the entire dynamic of the relationship? How do you know if someone likes you for yourself or for what you can provide for them? Elena thought about her own situation. If Robert had told her about his wealth that first night at the train station, would she have accepted his help? Would she have been able to see him as a friend, or would she have been too uncomfortable with the power imbalance? Would she have been able to trust that his interest in her was genuine? The honest answer was that she probably would have run away from his kindness, would have been too proud and too suspicious to accept help from someone she barely knew who had so much more than she did. In a way, Robert's decision to keep his wealth private had allowed them to build a real friendship based on who they were as people, not on what either of them could offer the other. Elena's phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Robert. She hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Elena, are you okay?" Robert's voice was full of worry. "I've been thinking about this all wrong. I should have told you from the beginning, and I'm sorry I didn't." "I'm okay," Elena said and realized she meant it. "I was hurt at first, but I think I understand why you did it now. Can I see you? I want to explain everything properly and I want to answer any questions you have. I don't want this to come between us when our friendship means so much to me." Elena smiled, feeling the tension in her chest begin to ease. "Come to the park on Maple Street. We can walk and talk." 20 minutes later, Robert appeared at the park entrance, looking more nervous than Elena had ever seen him. He approached her bench cautiously as if he wasn't sure of his welcome. "Thank you for giving me a chance to explain," he said, sitting down beside her. "Before you explain anything," Elena said, "I want to apologize for running out like that. It's just that after what happened with James, finding out that someone I trust has been keeping secrets from me felt like a red flag." Robert nodded, understanding immediately. "I should have realized that. After what you've been through, honesty should have been my first priority, not my comfort level." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, trying to see if knowing about his wealth changed how she felt about him. But sitting there in the park, with the evening light making his eyes look warm and kind, he was still just Robert. The man who had offered her kindness when she needed it most, who had become her friend when she had no one else to turn to. "Tell me about your business," she said. "I want to understand who you really are." Robert's business success story was both impressive and overwhelming. As they walked through the park paths lined with oak trees, he explained how he had started his consulting company with nothing but a business degree and determination to help other companies solve their most challenging problems. What had begun as a small firm with just him and one employee had grown into a major consulting group with offices in 12 cities and clients that included some of the biggest names in American business. "I never set out to become wealthy," Robert said as they paused by a small pond where ducks were settling in for the evening. "I just wanted to build something meaningful, something that would help other people succeed. The money came as a result of the work, not as the goal itself." Elena listened, trying to reconcile this information with the man she had come to know. "So when you say very wealthy, what exactly does that mean?" Robert looked uncomfortable with the question, but he answered honestly. "It means I don't have to work anymore if I don't want to. It means I could buy pretty much anything I might want without thinking twice about the cost. It means I have responsibilities to a lot of employees and clients, but also the freedom to choose how I spend my time." Elena felt a strange mix of emotions. She was impressed by Robert's success and touched by his obvious discomfort with talking about his wealth. But she was also beginning to understand the full scope of the gap between their lives. She was celebrating getting a job with the city that would pay her enough to cover her rent and basic expenses. He was talking about a level of financial freedom that she could barely imagine. "That's why you knew all the best restaurants and hotels," Elena said, pieces of their friendship clicking into place. "That's why you could offer to help with my hotel room without worrying about the cost." "Yes, but Elena, please believe me when I say that money had nothing to do with why I wanted to help you or why I wanted to be your friend. I would have offered the same kindness if I had been working at a coffee shop and living paycheck to paycheck." Elena wanted to believe him, but doubt crept into her mind. "How can you be sure of that? How can either of us be sure? You've never been in a position where helping someone would be a real sacrifice for you." Robert stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "You're right. I can't prove that to you, and I understand why you might question my motives now. But I can tell you that the reason I've been so careful about revealing my wealth is exactly because I've learned to tell the difference between people who care about me and people who care about what I can do for them." "And which category do I fall into?" "You fall into the category of people who accepted my friendship when you thought I was just a regular guy with a regular job. You fall into the category of people who have never asked me for anything, who have always insisted on paying your own way when we go out to eat, who chose your apartment based on what you could afford rather than asking me to help with something more expensive." Elena realized he was right about that. Even when Robert had offered to help with various things, she had always been quick to maintain her independence, to make sure she wasn't taking advantage of his generosity. She had done that instinctively, not because she knew about his wealth but because that's who she was. "There's something else," Robert said, looking even more nervous than before. "Something I need to tell you that's going to be harder to hear than the money stuff." Elena's heart sank. "What now?" "I haven't just been wealthy for a few years, Elena. My family has money, old money, the kind that comes with expectations and responsibilities and complications that I've been trying to escape my whole adult life." Elena stared at him. "What kind of family money?" Robert sighed deeply. "My great-grandfather founded a company that became one of the largest manufacturing businesses in the country. My family name is on buildings, on foundations, on charity organizations. I grew up with trust funds and private schools and the kind of privilege that most people can't even imagine." Elena felt like the ground was shifting under her feet. "So you're not just successful, you're actually rich. Like famous family rich." "Yes. And I've spent most of my adult life trying to prove that I'm more than just my family's money, that I can succeed on my own merit. That's why I started my own company instead of just joining the family business. That's why I live relatively simply despite having access to much more. And that's why I was so afraid to tell you the truth." Elena sat down heavily on a nearby bench trying to process this new information. Robert wasn't just wealthy, he was from the kind of family she had only read about in magazines, the kind of people who lived in a completely different world from hers. "I feel like I don't know you at all," she said quietly. Robert sat down beside her, but this time he didn't maintain his usual respectful distance. He turned to face her directly, his expression pleading. "You know me better than anyone has in years," he said. "You know that I'm kind but not pushy. You know that I listen when you talk and remember the things that matter to you. You know that I'm patient and that I believe in second chances and that I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. All of that is real, Elena. The money doesn't change any of that." Elena looked at him, searching his face for signs of the privileged rich boy she was now learning he had been raised to be. But all she saw was the same Robert who had approached her at the train station, who had helped her find an apartment, who had celebrated her job offer like it was the most important news in the world. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked. "We've been friends for weeks now. We've talked about everything else." "Because I was falling in love with you," Robert said simply, "and I was terrified that if you knew about my background, you would either run away because you felt intimidated, or you would stay for the wrong reasons." Elena's breath caught in her throat. "You're falling in love with me?" Robert nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. "I think I started falling in love with you that first night at the train station when you were so hurt, but still had the strength to worry about whether you were making the right decision. I fell in love with your courage and your kindness and your determination to rebuild your life on your own terms." Elena felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "Robert, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know you're still healing from what James did to you, and I know this wealth revelation has complicated everything. I don't expect you to say anything back, and I don't expect anything to change between us. I just needed you to know that my feelings for you are real, and they have nothing to do with money or charity or anything except who you are as a person." Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, overwhelmed by the honesty in Robert's voice and the gentleness in his expression. She had been so focused on protecting herself from being hurt again that she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge the growing feelings she had for him. But hearing him say the words out loud made her realize that she had been falling in love with him too. "I need time to think about all of this," she said finally. "The money, the family background, what you just said about your feelings. It's a lot to process." Robert nodded, though Elena could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Of course. Take all the time you need. And if you decide that this is too complicated, if you decide that we're from two different worlds to make this work, I'll understand." Elena stood up from the bench, feeling the weight of all these revelations pressing down on her. "Can you drive me home? I think I need to be alone tonight." The drive back to Elena's apartment was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When Robert pulled up in front of her building, Elena turned to look at him one more time. "Thank you for being honest with me," she said. "Finally." Robert's smile was sad but hopeful. "Thank you for listening. And Elena? Whatever you decide, I want you to know that knowing you has been the best thing that's happened to me in years." Elena got out of the car and walked to her building without looking back, but she could feel Robert watching her until she was safely inside. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, her mind was spinning with questions and doubts and feelings she wasn't ready to examine too closely. Once inside her apartment, Elena poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her couch, staring out the window at the city lights. Everything felt different now, like someone had taken a photograph she thought she understood and revealed that it was actually a puzzle with pieces she had never seen before. Was Robert's love for her real, or was it the romantic fantasy of a wealthy man who was drawn to the idea of rescuing someone? Could she trust her own feelings for him, or were they influenced by gratitude and the security his presence offered? And even if both of their feelings were genuine, could two people from such different worlds really build something lasting together? Elena's phone buzzed with a text from her sister Sarah, who lived across the country. "How are you doing? Haven't heard from you in a while." Elena started to type back a casual response, then stopped. She needed someone to talk to, someone who knew her well enough to help her think through this situation clearly. She called Sarah instead. "Elena, I was just thinking about you. How's the new apartment? How's the job search going?" "I got a job," Elena said. "And I met someone." "That's wonderful. Tell me everything." Elena took a deep breath and began to tell her sister the whole story. James's betrayal, meeting Robert at the train station, their growing friendship, and now the revelation about his wealth and his confession of love. When she finished, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Wow," Sarah said finally. "That's a lot to deal with all at once. How do you feel about him?" "That's the problem," Elena said. "I think I'm falling in love with him too, but I don't know if my feelings are real or if I'm just grateful to him for helping me when I was at my lowest point." "Elena, you're one of the smartest people I know when it comes to reading people and situations. If you think you're falling in love with him, it's probably not just gratitude. But what if I can't handle his world? What if I'm not sophisticated enough or wealthy enough to fit into his life? What if he fell in love with you exactly because you're not part of his world?" Sarah countered. "What if he's looking for something real and authentic and that's what he found in you?" Elena hadn't thought of it that way before. "You think I should give him a chance?" "I think you should figure out what you want, independent of what he wants or what you think you should want. Do you love him? Do you trust him? Do you think he makes you a better version of yourself? Those are the questions that matter, not how much money he has." After Elena hung up with her sister, she sat in her quiet apartment thinking about Sarah's questions. Did she love Robert? The answer, if she was honest with herself, was yes. Did she trust him? That was harder to answer after learning about his secrets. But when she really thought about it, she realized that he had never given her any reason to doubt his character or his intentions. Did he make her a better version of herself? Elena smiled, realizing that the answer to that question was definitely yes. In the weeks since meeting Robert, she had rediscovered her strength, her independence, her dreams for the future. He had encouraged her to pursue the job she really wanted, to choose an apartment that made her happy, to rebuild her life according to her own values and priorities. But there was still the question of whether two people from such different backgrounds could really build a life together. Elena had grown up in a middle-class family where money was always a consideration, where every major purchase required careful planning and saving. Robert had grown up in a world where money was never a limitation, where opportunities and experiences were available simply because he wanted them. Elena fell asleep that night with more questions than answers, but with a growing certainty that she couldn't let fear of the unknown keep her from exploring what might be possible with Robert. She had already survived one major heartbreak and come out stronger on the other side. Whatever happened with Robert, she would survive that too. Elena didn't call Robert the next day or the day after that. She threw herself into preparing for her new job, shopping for work clothes and reading everything she could find about the city's family services programs. She told herself she needed time to think, but the truth was that she was scared of making another mistake, scared of trusting someone who might hurt her, scared of not being enough for someone who seemed to have everything. Robert respected her request for space, but he sent small signals that he was thinking of her. A text message wishing her luck on her first day of work. A book delivered to her apartment about advocacy techniques in social work, with a note saying he thought she might find it useful. Flowers with no message at all, just beautiful white roses that made her apartment smell like hope. Each gesture made Elena's heart ache a little more, but also made her more confused about what she should do. Were these the actions of a man who genuinely cared about her, or the casual generosity of someone who had so much that giving didn't cost him anything? On her third day at work, Elena was assigned to help a family that was struggling with housing issues after the father lost his job. The mother, Maria, was about Elena's age with 2 young children and a pride that reminded Elena of herself. As Elena worked with Maria to find resources and support, she found herself thinking about Robert's wealth and what it meant to have problems that money could solve easily. "I just want to take care of my kids," Maria said during their meeting. "I don't want charity, I just want a chance to get back on my feet." Elena understood that feeling completely. She had felt the same way about accepting help from Robert, grateful for the kindness, but uncomfortable with the dependence it created. After work, Elena decided to call Robert. They needed to talk, and avoiding him wasn't solving any of her concerns or answering any of her questions. "Elena," Robert answered on the first ring, relief evident in his voice. "How are you? How was your first week at work?" "It's been good," Elena said. "Really good, actually. I love the work and I think I'm going to be able to help a lot of families. I'm so glad. I knew you would be amazing at this." Elena took a deep breath. "Robert, we need to talk. Can you come over tonight?" "Of course. Should I bring dinner? There's a great Thai place that delivers." "That would be nice." 2 hours later, Robert stood at Elena's door with bags of food and an expression of nervous hope. Elena let him in, noticing how he seemed to fill her small apartment with his presence, how everything felt more alive when he was there. They ate dinner mostly in silence, both of them aware that this conversation would determine the future of their relationship. When they finished eating, Elena cleared the dishes and then sat down on the couch, gesturing for Robert to join her. "I've been thinking about everything you told me," Elena began. "About your wealth, about your feelings, about why you kept it secret for so long." Robert nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I understand why you didn't tell me right away. I probably would have run away if you had, and we never would have had the chance to become friends. But," Robert prompted, sensing there was more. "But I'm struggling with what this means for us if there is in US. We're from completely different worlds, Robert. You grew up with every advantage, every opportunity. You've never had to worry about money or security or whether you could afford to take a risk. I've worked for everything I have, and even now with this new job, I'm still just getting by." Robert leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Elena, I know we come from different backgrounds, but that doesn't mean we can't build something together. If anything, I think our different experiences make us better together than we are apart." "How can you say that? You don't know what it's like to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. You don't know what it's like to stay in a job you hate because you can't afford to quit and look for something better. You don't know what it's like to have dreams that feel impossible because you don't have the resources to pursue them." Robert was quiet for a moment, and Elena could see that her words had hurt him. "You're right," he said finally. "I don't know what those struggles feel like, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. But Elena, just because I haven't experienced financial insecurity doesn't mean I haven't experienced pain or loss or the feeling that I'm not good enough." Elena felt a flash of guilt for being so harsh, but she pressed on. "I'm not saying you haven't suffered, Robert. I'm saying that we live in different realities. When you have a problem, you can throw money at it until it goes away. When I have a problem, I have to figure out how to solve it with whatever resources I can scrape together." "Is that really what you think of me?" Robert asked, his voice getting quieter. "That I just throw money at problems? That I've never had to work for anything or fight for anything or earn anything on my own merit?" Elena realized she had gone too far, but the words were already out there between them. "I don't know what to think, Robert. I don't know how to be with someone who could buy and sell my entire life without thinking twice about it." Robert stood up abruptly, hurt and anger flashing in his eyes. "That's not fair, Elena. You're reducing me to nothing but my bank account, which is exactly what I was afraid would happen if you knew about my wealth. I'm trying to be realistic about the differences between us." "No, you're trying to find reasons to push me away because you're scared," Robert shot back. "You're so afraid of being hurt again that you're looking for problems that don't exist." Elena stood up too, her own anger rising. "Problems that don't exist? Robert, you lied to me for weeks about who you really are. How am I supposed to trust that anything else about you is real? I didn't lie to you about anything that mattered. I told you about my divorce, my struggles, my feelings. I told you everything important about who I am as a person. Your wealth is part of who you are. Your family background is part of who you are. Those things shape your perspective on everything, and you hid them from me." Robert ran his hands through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "Fine. You want complete honesty? Here's some honesty for you. Yes, I have money. Yes, I grew up privileged. But I also grew up lonely with parents who cared more about appearances than their own son, in a world where everyone wanted something from me and no one just wanted to know me." Elena felt her anger deflating slightly, but she wasn't ready to back down. "So you found some poor struggling woman to rescue and feel good about yourself?" The words came out harsher than Elena had intended, and she saw Robert flinch as if she had slapped him. "Is that really what you think?" he asked quietly. "After everything we've shared, after all the conversations and the friendship and the connection we've built, you really think I see you as some charity case?" Elena felt tears starting to form, but she was too angry and hurt and scared to take back what she had said. I don't know what to think anymore, Robert. I thought I knew you, but it turns out there were huge parts of your life that you decided I didn't deserve to know about. Robert stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head sadly. You know what, Elena? You're right. We are from different worlds. But not because of money, because I believe that love is about seeing past differences and building something together, and you believe that differences are insurmountable obstacles. He headed toward the door, then turned back to face her one more time. I fell in love with your strength and your courage and your determination to build a better life for yourself. I fell in love with the woman who chose to stay and fight instead of running away. But maybe I was wrong about who you really are. The door closed behind Robert with a quiet click that sounded like the end of everything they had built together. Elena stood in her living room, surrounded by the remnants of their dinner and the echo of words that couldn't be taken back, and realized that she had just pushed away the best thing that had happened to her in years. Elena sank onto her couch and let the tears come. She had been so afraid of being hurt that she had hurt Robert instead. She had been so focused on protecting herself that she had destroyed the very thing she was trying to protect. Her phone buzzed with a text message, and for a moment Elena's heart leaped, thinking it might be Robert. But it was from her coworker asking about a case they were working on together. Elena stared at the message, realizing that work was the only good thing in her life right now, and she had almost ruined that too by letting her fear and pride get in the way of common sense. Elena spent the next hour replaying every moment of her fight with Robert, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. She realized that she had been looking for reasons to push him away ever since he told her about his wealth, that she had been building walls instead of bridges, that she had let her own insecurities convince her that their differences were problems instead of just differences. The truth was that Robert had never made her feel inferior or dependent. He had always treated her as an equal, had always valued her opinions and respected her choices. The only person who had been focused on their different financial situations was Elena herself. Elena picked up her phone to call Robert, then put it down again. What could she say? How could she apologize for reducing him to nothing but his bank account, for accusing him of seeing her as a charity case, for questioning the sincerity of everything he had shared with her? She had been so afraid of not being enough for him that she had made sure she wouldn't be enough for him. She had been so convinced that their love couldn't survive their differences that she had killed it herself before it had a chance to grow. Elena curled up on her couch and cried for everything she had lost, her marriage, her sense of security, and now the best relationship she had ever had a chance to build. She had survived James's betrayal and found the strength to start over, but this pain felt different because it was self-inflicted. She had no one to blame but herself for destroying something beautiful because she was too scared to believe it could be real. Elena spent the next 3 days throwing herself into work, trying to forget about her fight with Robert by focusing on helping other families solve their problems. But every success at work reminded her of how completely she had failed in her personal life, how she had let fear and pride destroy something precious. On Thursday evening, Elena was walking home from the grocery store when she saw a familiar figure sitting on the steps of her apartment building. Her heart leaped, thinking it might be Robert, but as she got closer she realized it was Maria, the client she had been working with to find housing assistance. Maria, what are you doing here? Elena asked, setting down her grocery bags and sitting beside the woman on the steps. I wanted to thank you, Maria said, tears in her eyes. We got the apartment. The landlord accepted our application and we can move in this weekend. My kids are going to have a real home again. Elena smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that had been missing for days. Maria, that's wonderful. You worked so hard for this. We both did, Maria said. But Elena, can I tell you something? When I first met you, I was angry about needing help. I felt like accepting assistance meant I was weak, like I had failed my children. Elena nodded, understanding the feeling completely. But you helped me see that accepting help doesn't make you weak, it makes you smart. You helped me understand that there's a difference between charity and community, between being a victim and being someone who's going through a difficult time and needs support. Elena felt tears starting to form as Maria's words hit home. I'm so glad you were able to see it that way. The thing is, Maria continued, I realized that I almost let my pride cost my children a home. I almost turned down help that could change our lives because I was too proud to admit I needed it. Elena stared at Maria, seeing herself reflected in the woman's story. She had done exactly the same thing with Robert. Let her pride and fear cost her a relationship that could have changed her life. Elena, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Elena wiped her eyes and managed a small smile. I'm fine. I'm just so happy for you and your family. After Maria left, Elena sat on her apartment building steps for a long time, thinking about pride and fear and the difference between charity and love. She realized that she had been so focused on maintaining her independence that she had forgotten that real love isn't about independence. It's about interdependence, about two people choosing to build something together that's stronger than what either of them could build alone. Robert had never tried to make her dependent on him. He had encouraged her to find her own job, her own apartment, her own path forward. His help had been about giving her a foundation from which to build her own life, not about making her reliant on him. Elena pulled out her phone and stared at Robert's number for a long time before finally finding the courage to call. The phone rang several times and Elena was afraid he wasn't going to answer, but finally she heard his voice. "Elena." His tone was cautious, guarded in a way it had never been before. "Robert, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I said to you. I was wrong and I need to see you so I can explain." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "Elena, I don't think that's a good idea. We both said things that can't be taken back." "Please," Elena said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "Just give me one chance to apologize properly. After that, if you never want to see me again, I'll respect that." Another long pause. "Where do you want to meet?" "The park where we walked that night when you told me about your wealth. Can you meet me there in an hour?" "I'll be there." Elena spent the next hour practicing what she wanted to say, trying to find words that could undo the damage she had caused. When she arrived at the park, Robert was already there, sitting on the same bench where they had talked about his family background. He looked tired and sad, and Elena felt a fresh wave of guilt for putting that expression on his face. "Thank you for coming," Elena said, sitting down beside him but leaving space between them. Robert nodded but didn't speak, waiting for her to say whatever she had asked him there to hear. "I need to tell you about something that happened today," Elena began, and she told him about her conversation with Maria, about the woman's realization that pride had almost cost her family a home. "I realized that I did the same thing to us," Elena continued. "I let my pride and my fear convince me that your love couldn't be real, that there had to be some ulterior motive behind your kindness. I turned you into the villain in a story where you were actually the hero." Robert's expression softened slightly, but he still didn't speak. "The truth is I was scared," Elena admitted. "Not just of your wealth but of how much I was starting to care about you. After what happened with James, the idea of loving someone again, of being vulnerable again, terrified me. It was easier to find reasons why we couldn't work than to take the risk of believing we could." "Elena." Robert started, but she held up her hand. "Please let me finish. I need to say this." Elena took a deep breath. "You were right when you said I was looking for reasons to push you away. I was so convinced that I wasn't good enough for someone like you that I decided to prove myself right. I attacked you for keeping secrets when the real problem was that I was keeping secrets from myself about how much I cared about you." Robert turned to face her more directly, his expression showing a mixture of pain and hope. "I said horrible things to you," Elena continued, tears starting to flow. "I accused you of seeing me as charity, of rescuing me to make yourself feel good. But the truth is, you never made me feel like charity. You made me feel valuable, worthy, like I deserved good things in my life. You helped me remember who I was before I lost myself in a bad marriage." "Elena, I understand why you were scared," Robert said softly. "I should have told you about my background sooner. I should have trusted you with the truth instead of deciding for you how you would react." Elena shook her head. "You were protecting something precious. The chance for us to know each other as people first before all the complications of money and status got in the way. I understand that now. And I understand that your wealth doesn't define you any more than my lack of it defines me." Robert reached over and gently took her hand. "I fell in love with you that first night at the train station not because you needed rescuing but because you were so strong even when you were broken. I fell in love with your courage, your kindness, your determination to build something better for yourself." Elena squeezed his hand, feeling hope bloom in her chest for the first time in days. "I fell in love with you too. Not because of what you could give me but because of who you are when you're with me. You make me feel like the best version of myself." "So where does that leave us?" Robert asked. Elena smiled through her tears. "It leaves us with a choice. We can let our fears and our differences keep us apart, or we can choose to build something together that's stronger than any obstacle we might face." Robert brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I choose building something together. But Elena, I need you to know that if we do this, if we try to make this work, there will be challenges. My family, my business associates, the social expectations that come with my background, it won't always be easy." Elena looked into his eyes, seeing the man she had fallen in love with and the future they could build together if they were brave enough to try. "I'm not afraid of challenges, Robert. I'm only afraid of losing you because I was too proud or too scared to fight for what we could have." Robert pulled her closer on the bench, and Elena felt the last of her walls crumble away. "I love you, Elena. Not despite our differences, but because of how those differences make us stronger together." "I love you too," Elena whispered, and when Robert kissed her, it felt like coming home and starting an adventure at the same time. As they sat together in the park where they had shared so many honest conversations, Elena realized that love wasn't about finding someone who was just like you. It was about finding someone who complemented you, who brought out the best in you, who was willing to work through the difficulties because the connection was worth fighting for. She had been so focused on their different backgrounds that she had almost missed the most important similarity between them. They were both people who had been hurt and had chosen to heal, who had faced betrayal and chosen to trust again, who believed that love was worth the risk of vulnerability. "What happens now?" Elena asked as they walked hand in hand through the park. "Now we take it one day at a time," Robert said. "We learn about each other's worlds, we face whatever challenges come up, and we remember that what we have is worth protecting." Elena smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "I can live with that plan." As they left the park together, Elena realized that this was what real love looked like. Not the fairy tale version where everything was perfect and easy, but the real version where two imperfect people chose each other despite their fears and differences, where they committed to working through problems instead of running away from them. She had learned that love wasn't about finding someone who would never hurt you. It was about finding someone worth forgiving, someone who would forgive you in return, someone who would choose to stay and fight for the relationship even when things got difficult. 6 months later, Elena stood in front of her bathroom mirror getting ready for the biggest night of her professional life. The city was honoring her with an award for her innovative work with families in crisis, and she was nervous and excited in equal measure. Her program had helped dozens of families find stable housing and support services, and she was being recognized as an emerging leader in social work. As she put on the dress she had bought for the occasion, a simple but elegant navy blue that made her feel confident and beautiful, Elena reflected on how much her life had changed. She loved her work, loved the apartment that had become a real home, loved the woman she was becoming as she learned to trust herself and her instincts again. Most of all, she loved Robert and the relationship they had built together over the past 6 months. It hadn't always been easy. There had been awkward moments with his wealthy friends who didn't quite know what to make of her, difficult conversations about how to navigate the financial differences between them, and moments when Elena's old insecurities surfaced and threatened to derail their progress. But they had worked through each challenge together with patience and honesty and a commitment to understanding each other's perspectives. Robert had introduced Elena to parts of his world gradually, always making sure she felt comfortable and never pressuring her to be anyone other than herself. Elena had learned to accept Robert's help when it was genuinely useful while maintaining her independence and self-respect. The doorbell rang and Elena opened it to find Robert standing there in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, holding a small bouquet of white roses, the same flowers he had sent her during those difficult days when they weren't speaking. "You look absolutely stunning," Robert said, his eyes lighting up as he looked at her. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Elena replied with a smile. "Are you ready for this? I'm still not used to being the center of attention at fancy events." "You're going to be amazing," Robert assured her, offering her his arm. "And I couldn't be prouder to be there with you tonight." The awards ceremony was held at the city's most elegant hotel, in a ballroom filled with social workers, city officials, and community leaders. Elena felt a moment of intimidation as she looked around at all the important people in attendance, but Robert's steady presence beside her helped her remember that she belonged there, that she had earned her place through hard work and dedication. When Elena's name was called and she walked to the podium to accept her award, she looked out at the audience and saw Robert beaming with pride in the front row. She also saw her co-workers cheering for her, city officials who had become supporters of her programs, and families she had helped who had come to celebrate her success. "When I started this job 8 months ago," Elena said into the microphone, "I thought I was here to help other people rebuild their lives. What I discovered is that helping others rebuild taught me how to rebuild my own life too." Elena's speech was short but heartfelt, focusing on the importance of treating every family with dignity and respect, of seeing past circumstances to the potential in every person. As she spoke, she felt the confidence that came from knowing she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. After the ceremony, there was a reception where Elena found herself surrounded by colleagues and community members who wanted to congratulate her and learn more about her programs. Robert stayed nearby but gave her space to shine, stepping in only when she seemed overwhelmed or when someone wanted to meet the man who had been supporting her work behind the scenes. "I'm so proud of you," Robert whispered in her ear during a quiet moment between conversations. "You've accomplished something amazing, and you did it all on your own merit." Elena smiled, remembering her fears about whether she could succeed without depending on anyone else. "I couldn't have done it without your support, but you're right, I did the work myself." "That's exactly how it should be," Robert said, kissing her forehead gently. Later that evening, as they sat on Elena's apartment balcony sharing a bottle of champagne and looking out at the city lights, Elena felt a peace and contentment she had never experienced before. "I have something I want to ask you," Robert said, setting down his champagne glass and turning to face her. Elena's heart skipped a beat, wondering if this was leading where she thought it might be. "We've been together for 6 months now," Robert continued, "and I know we've both learned a lot about ourselves and each other. I know that we come from different worlds, and I know that we'll always have to work to understand each other's perspectives." Elena nodded, curious about where he was going with this. "But I also know that I can't imagine my life without you in it," Robert said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I know that you make me a better man, that our love is worth fighting for, and that I want to spend the rest of my life building something beautiful with you." Robert pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a simple but stunning diamond ring. "Elena, will you marry me?" Elena stared at the ring, then at Robert's hopeful, nervous expression, then back at the ring. A year ago, she had been married to someone who didn't truly see her or value her. Now she was being proposed to by a man who had fallen in love with her strength, who supported her dreams, who had proven over and over that he valued her for who she was rather than what she could do for him. "Yes," Elena said, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes, I want to marry you." Robert slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, just like their relationship, which had seemed impossible at first but had turned out to be exactly what they both needed. "I love you, Elena," Robert said, pulling her into his arms. "Thank you for giving us a chance, for being brave enough to love again after being hurt." "I love you too," Elena replied. "Thank you for seeing something in me worth loving, for helping me remember who I was and supporting who I wanted to become." As they kissed on her balcony with the city sparkling below them, Elena thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. She had started at rock bottom, heartbroken and alone with nothing but a suitcase and the courage to walk away from something that was destroying her. Along the way, she had discovered that sometimes the worst things that happen to you lead to the best things that happen to you. James's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also freed her to find real love with someone who truly deserved her. Leaving everything behind had been terrifying, but it had also given her the chance to build a life that was authentically hers. Most importantly, she had learned that love wasn't about finding someone perfect or finding someone who would never challenge you. Real love was about finding someone who was willing to grow with you, who would fight for the relationship when things got difficult, who would see your worth even when you couldn't see it yourself. Elena looked at the ring on her finger, then at Robert's face glowing with happiness in the moonlight, then out at the city where she had rebuilt her life from nothing. She had everything she had ever wanted, but more than that, she had learned that she was strong enough to create the life she deserved. A year ago, she had been a woman walking away from betrayal with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. Tonight, she was a woman who had rebuilt her life on her own terms, found meaningful work that fulfilled her, and discovered a love that was real and lasting and worth every risk she had taken to find it. As Elena and Robert held each other on the balcony, planning their future together and celebrating how far they had both come, Elena realized that sometimes the voice behind you at the train station, the unexpected kindness from a stranger who becomes so much more, is exactly what you need to find your way home to yourself and to the love you deserve.